Welcome once again to Sit Social Issues Time. I'm Francois and my wonderful, beautiful, glamorous, incredible co-host.
Wow.
Gothamy, Tildy. We're back. We're still continuing our conversation because the last one was amazing on this ideal of body love.
Yes, it was.
And so we're going to continue talking about what does that look like for children.
Oh, God.
And we've already started. Yeah, we've already started. This is going to be a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
In its content. So let's just jump right in and look at, there's a clip that I'd love for us to look at, and then we're going to have some conversations about it.
The media is the message and the messenger, and increasingly a powerful one.
People learn more from media than any other single source of information. So if we want to understand what's going on in our society in the 21st century, we have to understand media.
If you think about media and technology, they're delivering content that is shaping our society. They're shaping our politics, they're shaping our national discourse, and most of all, they're shaping our children's brains and lives and emotions.
Wow. Powerful.
It's a powerful.
From Misrepresentation, a movie that I strongly encourage people to look at, a fabulous documentary. Just looking at those stats, what do you think?
10 hours a day.
Yes.
Consuming media. I mean, that's profound.
Wow.
You know, when I was growing up, it was more about playing, riding your bikes, and times have changed.
Three Stooges.
I mean, yeah.
Right.
You know? I was just waiting for Saved by the Bell to come on, you know? But this is outrageous numbers.
But let's talk about that, the differences. I had a conversation the other day where we were looking at the differences as kids, and I was telling them, I remember when TV went off and that the Star Spangled Banner would come on, and you've got the planes flying across the screen, and the TV would go off, and I remember telling my daughter that, and she's like, so what did y'all do? I was like, we went to bed. Yeah. What else would you do or talk? I mean, but now you've got Nickelodeon 24 hours. What kid is up watching Nickelodeon? But it is very different in terms of the access to all of this stuff. So times have truly changed.
And it's also, what's also amazing is that how we live our lives based on what we see.
Right. Well, and it's not just television, right? Because it's also those games.
Yeah.
And the gamification and how many hours kids spend playing video games nowadays that do the same thing that TV does, you know, which is murder, kill, destroy, you know, all those things. So it's, I think, as a kid, I would have been overwhelmed.
I think so. By
the number of choices, you know, that I have. I was a latchkey kid, you know, so for me, going home, we had the Three Stooges, we had I Love Lucy, you know, until my parents got home after 5. So, but it was a lot different, you know. And then when they did come home at 5, we went outside and played. You know, so it's a totally different world for kids today.
I mean, you see these kids and parents go out to restaurants, you know, having lunch or dinner, and what do they have? They're on their whole family, the entire family. There's no conversation whatsoever.
You know, I was at a local restaurant here probably last year.
Yeah.
And I was with a friend of mine, and I looked over to my left, and there was a father and probably his 6-7-year-old daughter, and the daughter didn't have a gadget, and she was just sitting there looking at him the whole time. He was on his phone texting. The whole time he was on his phone texting. I mean, I literally wanted to go up to him and say, look, look at your daughter. She's waiting to engage with you, you know. I mean, literally, she was just looking at him like, just waiting, you know, and for the next 15, 20 minutes, he was on his phone.
Well, and it says something about disconnection, that even though media has been this wonderful resource, and especially with technology and social media, there's a disconnect. I remember talking about even the front porch, because at one time you saw in communities people had front porches where you could wave at your neighbors and talk to each other. And many of us just go into our garages and we're immediately tapped into this stuff.
Yeah.
And so we don't even have conversations with our neighbors, but definitely our kids miss out on the opportunity to be molded, because this is what's molding them. You brought up something that's really interesting. I was going, wow, the games. Because even with games, you see how women in those games are objects. And some of the games are so explicit in terms of the sexual content. How does that shape a kid and their interactions in schools with each other? What do you think?
I think it's normal. I mean, they're playing it, so they're going to think it's normal.
Well, they're desensitized, even to death. I think it's something watching how children now don't have a regard for death, because they see it so much in video games where you're killing up people and all this blood, that it doesn't matter if I do that to another human life, because there's no value.
Right. Well, have you seen that video? And somebody just recently showed it to me, the video of the gentleman that was shot down. I can't remember, but somebody actually videotaped.
Story.
In South Carolina, and somebody actually videotaped the whole thing.
Yes.
And I thought, I don't know if I could have done that. I mean, how desensitized is this person to be able to actually videotape somebody being killed like this? And I really think it goes back to being desensitized and watching it over and over, and even playing video games or whatever you want to do. But we have gotten to a point to where now we can actually videotape somebody being killed and keep videotaping.
Because they think it's normal. I mean, how many videos do you see on Facebook where, somebody's filming girls fighting against each other? Or, it's just so negative. And we're participating in watching it. So, we shouldn't come down on the others who post it, but that's just so wrong. And it's right. It goes back to being desensitized.
But you made me think about I don't know if you guys saw the Sharkeisha video of the young woman in Houston who was going over to her friend's house to pick up clothes. A group of girls set her up. And so in the video, they're screaming, "No, Sharkeisha, no." And I mean, she's kicking, and you could hear the way she's beating this girl and her face. And even the New York case with the young women in McDonald's who were fighting. And you had all these spectators that are videotaping these young women fighting each other. It's very interesting to see how these media images have created this female aggression in ways that we haven't seen before.
Right. And then a public paparazzi now.
Right.
Yes.
Because if you have a phone,
there you go.
I mean, who knows what you might get next, right? And
Right.
be the next guy that, CNN purchases a video from.
Right.
And by exploiting two women fighting at McDonald's or wherever, so I think it's dangerous right now.
It's like, where does technology stand? Does it do more bad than good, or does it do more good than bad? And I guess it's the utilization. How do you use it? And that's going to be up to the individual.
Right. Well, and I think it says that there's a responsibility to parents that we have to be more engaged and involved with our children in shaping them.
Right.
So we've got games that play an impact. We saw these numbers about kids and how much time they spend on it. Toys.
Yeah.
What's the role of the toys in terms of how, especially young women, see themselves?
Is Mattel still in the picture? I don't know.
Well, because I know for me, I had Atari. Or you had, Space Invaders, which had no human interaction whatsoever, or even, what was that other one? I can't remember. Galaga, Pac-Man, So there was no human interaction, It was just all skill is what we, So I think it's really interesting in the day and age that we live in, and how dangerous it potentially could be for children that are exposed to a lot of this violence and sexuality, way before we were ever exposed to it. I know that I was ever exposed to it on TV, and stuff, because if you showed a little bit of cleavage, Wonder Woman was like risque.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I was like, I want to be like that.
Three's Company was risque.
Living in the house
putting them out
together. And they made sure they had different bedrooms.
It's just amazing. With time, so many things have changed, and I'm curious to know what it's going to be like within the next 10 years.
Right.
Because technology just keeps getting, expanding and expanding.
Well, did you all have Barbie dolls?
Yes.
I had a baby alive, but it wasn't a Barbie doll.
You had a baby alive.
Barbie doll. We didn't know better in India, so.
My sister had a Barbie. I didn't have a Barbie.
I'll tell you a story about one of my dolls. So I had this little blonde-headed doll. That's probably another show. And I decided I wanted to straighten her hair. And that was already straight. But I felt like my mama was pressing and straightening my hair. So I wanted to press my doll's hair. So I straightened the little white doll's hair. And she had this afro. It was this little tiny blonde afro. I remember my friends would come over to the house and they go, "What happened to your doll's hair?" Like, what? Why does her hair look like yours? so my mom then was like, "We're getting Barbies that look like you so we can stop this madness." But let's show the clip about the Barbie. So what's wrong with Barbie? For a little girl, if that's what she gets from 4 to 8, according to the stat, what impression does Barbie make on a little girl about who she is?
Mommy, why don't I have those? Because I want to know what those are. What's missing? I'm a girl. Barbie's a girl. What's missing from me? I'm not sure it's the right message. And I didn't realize that until later on in life.
Yeah.
And like, wow, when little girls play with dolls, they should look like a doll, not Baywatch babe,
Well, I always wondered about, and I was telling you all this earlier, her feet were so little. So I always thought about how she fall over with those boobs being so big. I thought,
That's why you have to hold her up.
A strong wind comes. Barbie's like falling back. She doesn't know how to balance. But she's unrealistic in terms of proportions of what women really look like.
Right. I think on the opposite side of that, they're 4 years old. As a 4-year-old, do you really know what you're doing, or are you just dressing Barbie to have fun? Are you combing her hair?
Yeah.
It's so innocent from an innocent perspective. Is it really bad for them to play with a doll like that and to have the imagination of what to wear, what shoes to pick out, what hairstyle?
If there's no Ken.
Yeah.
And there's no Ken and Corvette involved. Is it from the child's perspective? I see it very innocent.
Right.
But at the same time, what are they surrounded by?
Right.
I think is more to the point, right? Where a 4, 5, 6-year-old is just playing with a doll, and they kind of mimic, because a lot of counselors use dolls, to help kids express themselves
through play therapy.
Play therapy and stuff. So again, they mimic what's around them, and I think from a certain perspective, at least for me, looking at it as an adult now, it's like, these are kids. Yes, as an adult, we can look back and say, well,
why?
Why? But from a child's perspective, is it still innocent? And when does it not become innocent for a child to be playing with the Barbie?
And of course, as you said, you don't want to take that innocence away from them, because they don't know any better, and let their imagination go, and that's okay. But it's like later on, it's like, do you realize, oh, well, what did I do? What kind of message did I send? Was it appropriate to get her a Barbie doll? So
well, and I think as a mom, I bought Kaze dolls that were more like the American Girl and those kinds of dolls. And then she had a Barbie. It was when I went to India, I wanted her to have that. And I was like, don't play with it, because it's pretty.
Because of the dress and everything.
And you mess up that sari, little girl, it's a problem. But I didn't really buy those kinds of dolls so much for her, because I really, I'd read that when they play with blocks, it does something for them in terms of their spatial ability. So it's like engineer, I'm programming you toward engineering. That didn't work. But I think the message that it can send for young women is, this is what I'm supposed to look like. And I think it's an unrealistic expectation for them very young, because you look at your mom and you're playing in her makeup and you see heels. And so you're trying to figure out who you are. And I think, to your point, there is this innocence that children really don't have. But I think it's, how do you expose them to a variety of dolls and toys so that they don't really think that this is what beauty is, and I'm supposed to have this long flowing hair and a waist that's this big. You know, because realistically, her proportions are just totally crazy. But I think that there's a good conversation piece that mothers could use a Barbie doll around to talk about. Hey, this is just a toy, but this is not the expectation of what being a woman is supposed to be.
Well, and there's I can't remember who told me the story. There was a father, actually, I think it was in New York, who took his daughter shopping at FAO, maybe. And so the daughter was maybe 8-9 years old. She goes straight for the Ken. And the woman that was working there told her, oh no, honey, this is more for little girls. So she takes her over to the Barbie section. And the father then goes to the little girl and says, and tells the woman, no, if she wants Ken, she can have Ken. And immediately, 5-6 years old, I can't remember, really young, the little girl says, no, Daddy, this is what girls are supposed to play with, and this is what I want. And so immediately the impression was made, that's wrong, this is right.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, I thought that was so powerful, in that in an instant,
your mindset can just change.
Yeah, especially in a young person's life like that, you know?
And kids are sponges, you know? Whatever they see, they just quickly grasp and understand. Wow.
And I think the challenge is, how do we balance all of this for children? Because there is all this information that they're being inundated with. And so how do we make sure that we aren't programming them and saying, this is right because it's gender specific, you know? And I think that's, you know, I've seen girls playing with G.I. Joes and having and hearing people saying to them, you shouldn't play with that because that's not what girls do. And I think it sends such damaging messages. But now you're seeing parents who really are upping this and having some confusion, I think, about what beauty looks like for a little kid. So let's look at our next clip and we'll talk about beauty.
Are you beautiful?
Yes, I am beautiful. And you told me, you said if I was beautiful, and I'm always beautiful.
Who said what about that?
You said, are you beautiful? And I said, and I was almost gonna say, she's thinking I'm not beautiful, and I am always beautiful.
I'm so sad.
Wow.
So what do you think about this?
So let me get this straight. Because somebody asked her if she was beautiful, she automatically thought that she didn't think she was beautiful, or saying that she wasn't beautiful.
Right. That's what I understood from it too.
That's so sad.
It's so sad. And she looks like she's, what, like 4?
She does. 4 or 5 years old.
With makeup.
Yeah, that's the thing. So what do y'all think about the not only just that piece, because it made me so sad when I saw it, and I thought, my God, this baby is her desire for approval. God, what are you setting her up for later on? But the pageant thing, what are your thoughts about that in beauty for girls?
You know, children have enough pressures going on in their life and trying to find an identity. And when you add things such as this and pressure them into being in pageants and things like that, I don't know what kind of effect it's going to have in the long term. You know, are the parents living through their children? And that's a question that always comes to mind.
Yeah.
That's a tough one too.
Yeah.
I mean, especially as a product of a pageant.
Oh, really?
I know you in the presence of a beauty
Hold
queen.
on.
Yeah.
Can you do the wave?
I can, yes.
It's a light bulb.
Hold on, you gotta just grip the finger. Just kind of.
The Vaseline on the
Right. So when I was 15, 15, when I did my first pageant. But I can tell you, it was such a great experience for me because we had talent and we had, evening gown and all that. And I was not the type of person or girl that would have ever done that. But what it did for my self-esteem was really, really great.
Right.
You know, it was just wonderful, you know, for a 14, 15-year-old perspective, you know. Right. But on the flip side of that, looking at these little girls and how they're all done up with makeup and they're so grown up. And I mean, if people watch the rest of that video, you kind of see the horror of the whole pageantry, you know, and the mom behind the girl, and even the father, you know, you have to put blame where it belongs. So I think there's two sides to the pageantry. You know, for me, it was a great experience in actually getting me more out of my shell and giving me more self-confidence. And on the other side, it's the ugliness of parents using pageants to live through their kids.
It definitely has a positive and a negative effect. I mean, you know, some pageants are really, really, you know, keen on great scholarships, you know, for college. And that's great as long as it's setting something positive. But, you know, having a pageant at such a young age and having your child participating in it, that's where I'm like, I'm not sure.
Well, it got Honey Boo Boo a show.
Well, it did. I've never seen a Honey Boo Boo show, but it did.
For several seasons. They were to move on up like the Jeffersons. So Honey Boo Boo did something. It worked for them.
No, the way I look at it is, okay, you have this 4 or 5-year-old, you know, participating, and she, you know, she's told every day she's beautiful, and, you know, she wins every pageant. But what if she participates in a pageant and she loses? I mean, what does that do to, I mean, poor little baby. You know, that breaks my heart, you know? Yeah. Just looking at her and watching her, it's just like, oh my God, that brings tears to my eyes.
But I think it's this issue of what are we setting kids up for in terms of what's good and what's bad. I mean, it's making value judgments. So if you don't win, then there's something wrong with you. You know, I was talking to someone about, this is funny because this whole conversation, pieces of it has been my week. But we were having this conversation about there's schools who are deciding not to use red pens because they don't want to hurt kids' feelings. Or they won't give, you know, one time when you run the race, they give just 3 people a trophy. You know, now they won't do that. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets a ribbon. And so how do you set kids up for success when they really don't have the understanding of you're not going to always win because there's going to always be somebody who's prettier. You know, and so to see this baby at 4 years old begin to shape and form her ideas around who she is because of what she looks like. If she's not getting balance, and I can't speak to what her parents are doing, but if she's not getting that balance, that's detrimental.
Right. So what would that balance look like? Because, you know, I think we're all pretty positive people, so you want to positively reinforce children. So at what point is that line being crossed to where it's too much positive reinforcement and not enough of reality? You know, of what to expect in life and the disappointments that are there.
Well, and for me as a parent, it's more than me telling you, you're so beautiful. I think I have a gorgeous kid, but I also recognize that beauty changes and I want her to understand that. So I want her to understand to develop all of these other pieces of who she is. And so you can, you know, be an amazing looking woman. Great, but if you don't have a brain and you can't put a complete sentence together, then we're going to have some problems for your future. So I think as parents, it's how do you holistically help your kids with the extracurricular where you're not just doing the pageants and that's all they're doing, but you've got to have, you know, all these other things. How do you build them as a spiritual being? I think all of those pieces you have to be very intentional about. And as a society, I don't know if we do that. Someone made a comment this week that was so profound to me, and she talked about, and she used it in the context of the church, but she said, all we prepare people for is birth, and then we want them to get educated, we want them to get married, have kids, and die. And I'm like, wow, when you really think about it, so much of our lives are focused on that. And there is not this, well, who do you become? What is your purpose in that? And I think for pageants or anything else we do with kids, how do we help them find their purpose that is beyond just being pretty?
So you think it would be helpful if we, as a parent, to be encourage your kids to be more versatile.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's how you find their gifting. Right. I mean, so if your gifting is solely on putting on this makeup, what happens when you're not looking that good anymore because you grow up, you know, and people change. Right. So how do you help kids explore all these possibilities? I think to your point with the pageant, I think there is some good in it. I've seen young women go through it and they've gotten some great, you know, exposure, but not only that, they found themselves, they found their voice because some people pulled it out and they were able to showcase their talent. So I think there is some goodness that exists in that. But I think as parents, it is our job to help pull out all those pieces of our kid and not just focus on this one little part of who they are.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. It's that personal development that goes beyond the exterior and really focuses on the inside of somebody's soul and spirit and mindset. You know?
So let me ask you guys this. What do you think it does to boys? So if boys are seeing all this same stuff that our girls are looking at and our girls are wanting to dress up and doll up, what does it do for them in terms of how they see themselves in relation to women?
You know, I've never thought about that. Never have. But if I was a man, you know, watching a pageant at a young age, you know, I'm dreaming about who I want to marry, and I'm continuously being exposed to this is what a true beauty looks like, then that's what I'm going to expect.
Agreed. And it's a disservice. What do you think, Tilly?
I think two things. First, I think that if boys, like brothers, have sisters that may be in pageants, they think it's just silly. Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, they take it from a silly standpoint. And it's just something their sister or, you know, sibling might do. From the other perspective, though, I think it does kind of frame their mindset. Their mindset a little bit about what to expect and what they like, what they don't like, maybe, as they get older. But I think initially, if you're talking about 4 to 8 year old boys, I mean, they're still thinking that girls are dumb. You know?
Cooties and things like
you know, or that you know, I mean, they just kind of think they're playing, and it's just silly, you know. But I do think that it will tend to mold their mentality and their thinking. Yeah,
I actually heard it wasn't too long ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, during the Miss Universe pageant. I actually heard a guy say, "Man, I want whoever I marry, oh God, I hope she looks like Miss Puerto Rico."
Well, that would be every man.
I mean, Miss Puerto Rico's beautiful, don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, there's other things. Beauty is so skin deep, and it's just not the outside, and it's the way you articulate yourself, you know, the way you speak, your brains, and that should be the focus.
And that gets lost.
It does get lost.
It really does.
And you might miss on something so beautiful and amazing.
Because you want Miss Puerto Rico.
Yeah, you want Miss Puerto Rico.
That's crazy.
Right.
And Miss Plano might be sitting right next to you.
Exactly. I mean, hi, I'm Miss Willow Bend. 2015.
Yeah, practice the wave, girl.
So let me ask you both this. How were you shaped as young kids? What shaped you in terms of thinking about your body image and what you were supposed to look like? And how did that make you who you are today? What are your memories?
That's a tough question for me, because coming from a lot of abuse from the time I was 5 till about I was 12, being sexually molested so many times, almost daily, between I was 5 and 10. So I didn't like myself. I covered myself up. I was big tomboy. I wore the big baggy clothes. So I had a totally different childhood, you know, than most people. So it was unfortunate. So my childhood had a really negative, I had a negative self-image, you know, growing up. So it was tough.
Right. Wow. What about you, Francois?
I did the big shirt thing because I started developing very early. I started wearing a bra in 3rd grade. Yeah. And so because of that, it created a whole bunch of attention that I did not want. And my mother was extremely protective because she didn't want older guys starting to prey on me. So I always did this. Yeah. I had, even all through high school, I mean, I always did this because I was covering myself up because I didn't like the attention that it gave me. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was, much older that I started looking at clothes that even would fit regular, because I was so embarrassed by how people would treat me. And the girls who had that, it was like that's who all the guys wanted to date.
Right.
And I saw friends who developed early who became very promiscuous, because that was the way that they could get attention,
right,
and to keep people interested in them. And so for me, it was looking at all this and going, oh my God, I don't like any of this. Why can't people just talk to me?
Yeah.
And I'd sit up and have conversations with my boobs. I remember, I'll never forget, this guy was in the store.
Did they
Seriously.
talk back?
That's
I
what,
got to ask.
Well, I'm going to tell you what happened. So I'm in a store and this guy comes up to me and he's staring at him. And so I looked at him and I said, what are they saying to you? I've been wanting them to tell. Yes,
that.
I did. I said, I've been wanting to hear them talk and they won't talk to me. Tell me, what are they saying to you? If you could have saw this man's face,
Right.
you could have bought him for a nickel.
That's hilarious.
It was so funny. But I did. He started, I said, tell me, and I'm lifting. What are they saying? I've been trying to get them to talk to me too.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh
so that's been my history, is being a little bit, awkward about it, because it got me attention that I didn't always like.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and with me, my culture was so different, being a first generation, Indian American. My parents, I was their first child, coming to a new country. I had the longest, dorkiest years ever. And it wasn't so much my parents teaching, I had to learn through my friends. Like, oh my God, 5th grade came and I'm like, man, I am a dork. The glasses and the braces. And that's when I was like, I don't think I fit in. I look very different. I was probably the only Indian in elementary school. We came from a very small town. And I think by 9th grade, I decided, I got to start changing the way I look. So it was more self-inflicted, maybe through peer pressure, like you're supposed to look a certain way, And I would always go home crying, like, why do you dress me up like a dork? Why do you do that? Oh, go with me. It's just, you have to do what we say. We are the parents. Okay, but I'm not going to argue with that. But yeah, that was my experience.
And I think what happens when people become moms is you think about that stuff. And so when I see how kids are dressed, I oftentimes think about, was that the mom who had that experience? Because my kid, people would laugh because they had this little pantsuit that had like this fur around it, the arms and the neck, and she had little hair and it had fur around the legs, and she'd walk in, everybody's like, oh my God, where'd you get that outfit? I had so much fun living through her, because I'm like, you're gonna be the kid that's so cute when you walk in. It was so sad. She was about 2 and I got her these little leather pants. Now I did not spend a whole lot of money because she grew like a weed, but she had on little cowboy boots and her little leather pants. So I'm like, that's what I wanted to look like. I couldn't do it, so you're gonna rock it. And kid had no idea it was even Saturday. She is like, what?
Whatever.
But I think as parents, because you go through those experiences feeling dorky, because I felt like that a lot, that you want your kid to have a different experience, and no matter what you do, they still go through the awkwardness of trying to find themselves. And I think it's a matter of how do we help not forget our experiences, because I think as adults, we get amnesia and forget what it's like to be a kid. How do we not allow ourselves to forget and use that as a platform to let them grow, and tell them, hey, it's not the same, but I do get it.
I understand. Yeah, we are our own testimony.
Right.
Right. So I hear my sister say to my nephew, and he's 1 year old. She would be like, I am not going to dress him the way Mom dressed us. Never,
Or
ever.
cut his hair.
Or cut his hair. I had that hair experience. My mushroom haircut, there was more on this side than this side. No, that picture, we will not use it for blackmail, okay? Thank you.
No, we're putting it out there. I want to see that picture.
I had the pigtails and the braces much later on. No, we're not doing that. But I think we all go through a very, very awkward period in our life. And I think, when we have open conversation, if our parents sit and talk to us or other people, I think it really helps, as we grow and flourish and bloom. So.
Yeah. Well, but I do think that the media and our surroundings play a big part in how much pressure we put on kids nowadays. I mean, the number of suicides, with kids alone is just staggering to me, and how it continues to grow. And it really all goes back to the same thing that we were talking about, even for us as grown women, to that self-esteem and that self-love and being comfortable with exactly where we are and who we are. And how do we get these kids, our kids, to be okay with themselves, you know, and to get to a point to where it doesn't matter. I may look different than you or than anybody else, but that's okay. You know, we don't have to be copies of Barbies.
Exactly.
You know, there's not a standard for us.
Exactly.
You know, we are the standard as an individual for ourselves, and to be okay with that.
Do you both believe or think that children these days, specifically we're talking maybe from 13 to 16, they dress older than what they are?
Oh, definitely. You know, but I think that media plays so much into that. Because my daughter and I have been having this conversation about bikinis. And I've said no, because she's so developed that it's like, I don't want to go to jail.
Right.
And so to avoid me killing some young man, I think it's in his best interest. We're saving a life by you not wearing this. So we've had to make some adjustments. I'm just being honest. We've had to make some adjustments about what she's gonna wear. You know, so she's like, "Well, can I do a 2-piece?" Yes, it's the long two-piece with the, you know, bottoms.
Right.
But then there's a wrap at some point. And I know she's a kid, and I want, you know, joking aside, I recognize that that's part of growing up. But because of the world that we live in, I have to be protective of what I put my baby into. But some of the clothing, I remember when she was much smaller, and we would go buy Easter shoes. All the heels were like this. They don't really make the little clog heel anymore. And so it was hard to find clothing. And because she's in a junior size, she's 14, you know, and she's tall. She's like 5'7". Well, all the clothes that are available to her are adult-like clothing. And, you know, even though they have Forever 21 and all these other places, the clothing can be a little bit provocative. And I think it's a challenge as a parent. You're trying to figure out, how do you keep them trendy? Because you don't want them picked on for that. But at the same time, how do you make sure they're not going out and people are going, how much? You know, and I think it's a challenge, a tension that we have to wrestle with.
Encouraging age-appropriate clothes, you know?
Yeah.
And that's hard, because there really isn't an age-appropriate clothing at this point. When we were growing up, it was a bit different, because, I mean, it was Sears. I mean, you really didn't have a whole lot of choices. They have all these choices, so it's hard to have things that are age appropriate. And I see 9-year-olds who wear makeup. So it's really hard to have that kind of community standard that existed at one time. That doesn't exist anymore.
I mean, come on, we see 45-year-old women wearing 9-year-old shorts. So
fat on their booty, that gets me.
At the same time, you know, it's like, what are these kids seeing in their own home? And I mean, I'm not one to say you can't or can't wear something. But what is the impression that you're giving your children by the way that you dress? You know, and also at the same time, not wanting to be one of those judgmental people that says, well, did you see what she was wearing? You know, I mean, she was 9-10 years old, you know, and to be to have somebody molest her or assault her, that's still no excuse. So, you know, not playing into what the media always does for girls as well. It's like, well, did you see what she was wearing? Because that's the first thing that they talk about when somebody is sexually assaulted or raped.
What is she
wearing? You know, did she ask for it?
That drives me so crazy too.
And so there's a healthy balance between all that, and being able to say, is that age appropriate for a 9 or 10-year-old? Probably not. But you know, is she asking for some negative remarks or, you know, an assault on her? Absolutely not either.
So it's the worst excuse in the world.
Yeah, because one of my daughter's teachers at another school, not the school she's going to now, so I don't get calls, but at a former school, a teacher made a comment about that if you dress a certain way, then you're asking for something. And my daughter came home and she's like, Mama, I'm mad. And I'm like, why? And she explained it, and she said, Mama, I should be able to wear whatever I want and not have to worry about somebody touching me. But even with that said, baby, we live in a world of people who don't believe that. And so how do we make sure that we're protecting you and yet you still have freedom to be who you are? And that is a challenge, because I get sick of hearing people saying, well, what did she have on? And not questioning the intentions of the person who did it, to go, well, did he take the time to figure out how old she was? Yeah. Interesting. So what would you say is a call to action? Because, you know, at the end of every show, we're always thinking about how do we empower people, because we want folks to go away with some tangible tools. One thing I would say is the misrepresentation documentary. If you have not seen that, you got to do it. She just came out with a new one for boys.
Wow.
And I heard that one will make you cry because she talks about the impact that this media conglomerate mess that we're in, how it impacts young men. And so what I would tell people to do is get educated. Look at ways that you can really help your kids and use misrepresentation as an opportunity to sit down with your children, watch it together and talk about it.
Yeah.
I think it should be shown in every school at an early age, maybe first, second grade. And for every grade, it should be shown, and there should be open forum, open panel, open discussion about this. It's about awareness, it's about education, it's about open conversation. And the earlier, the better.
And I think those conversations also have to start in the home.
Yeah.
Right.
And going back to what you said earlier about developing them internally and not focusing so much on the external.
Right.
But building that character up.
Right.
And reinforcing how important that is versus the external.
Right. And, and it's perfectly okay for a parent to tell their child, you're beautiful, you're this, but there's also more depth to you just beyond this,
And I think as women, we got to believe that before we start telling our kids that.
We have to
I
believe
think
that
we have to
ourselves.
believe that ourselves. One of the things that I would love to see ushered back in is a movement around grace and dignity. There was a time in the 50s where you saw these women who had such grace and class. And it wasn't that they were all dolled up in makeup, but it was the way that they carried themselves. I would love to see that movement come back where you really are seeing women who live in the fullness of who they are instead of, getting all this stuff to make them feel valuable, that it's from within.
I love that grace.
So that's going to be the movement.
So I can't put my feet up on the table?
Girl, no. No, I don't have to do this. No.
Give me a beer!
Take a seat. Sit. Come sit. So thank you once again for joining us. Our next topic is going to be on jealousy. That sin that women all go through where we're hating on each other. We're going to learn how
That's gonna be good.
congratulate instead of hate.
Yeah.
And so thank you once again to my co-hosts. Thank you for a wonderful conversation. And we appreciate you guys.
See you next time.
Thank you.